Welcome again to the complete free Flutter course presented by yours truly, Ovidus Mazuru. Before we begin, I do need to apologize because there is some noise outside. Hopefully the microphone won't pick it up. There are just some kids playing outside, so you might hear, laughs, stuff like that. Another quick note about the naming of my files. You might have noticed that now I'm in a file called homescreen 3-8.dart. If I open up my folders, you can see this was the initial home screen which we created, but because I'm uploading the files at the end of the video to GitHub so you guys can download it, I need to have different files. So home screen 3-7, 3-8. So then in my main.dart, I do need to import the different file. But for you guys, you can just continue using home screen and don't worry about this. That said, you might remember from last time, we were building up our UI, and so far we have the app bar on the top and we have the containers built, ready to build the inside content. And let's take a look at GIMP. This is a image editing software, so we can see exactly what we need to build. Today we're going to be building this container here, and we can see that because we have the text at the top and then the images after, this whole thing is going to need to be a column with our title first. And then I'm going to need a row below that. And in that row, this is going to be one element, and this is going to be another element. Inside my row, you can see one element will be here with the first image, the favorite button, the price, and another button here to add. And inside this will be a column and this will be a row. So this segment by itself will be a row containing the image and the heart button. Then below that we'll have another row, this one containing just the price and the plus button over there. As for the layout for this part, I'm going to leave it up to you guys to figure out. So hint, hint, that might be your exercise. Okay, but now that we know the layout, let's go ahead and start coding. So I'm going to go back to my VS Code and I'm just going to close this so it doesn't take up my RAM. And one cool trick I want to show you guys, something that's really cool about both Flutter and VS Code, is that if I'm in my home screen here, I can easily find where I need to code because I can look at the body and I know it's going to be this body widget, and I can control click on it. And when I control click, it's going to take me down to that widget. What's really cool about this is that it can even show me the code that the team over at Google have written for me. So I could even control click on container and see exactly how container works under the hood. But there's no need to do that right now. I'm just showing you a quick way to jump over this widget and in here. So now we're in our container. We are going to restart Visual Studio Code because it's not giving me my correct brackets. So just a second. Okay, so this time my extension is working. That colorizes my brackets, which looks much nicer. So we're inside our container and I'm going to give it a child. And the child, as we said, is going to be a column. And the column is going to take children. And the first child is going to be that text widget. So I've just opened up the dribbble screenshots, but in a regular image viewer, so it uses less RAM. So we can see this is going to say cosmetics that everyone loves. We can even check the capitalization. They use the E here. At the end we'll put exclamation mark. And then I thought I was running it, but apparently I stopped it. Now that I have this running, we can see that the container has resized itself to take just the width of its child. So the way we can prevent that from happening is to say width, and I'll say double.infinity. And refresh this, and now it's taking the correct size. Another thing I'm going to do is we can see in our image that my text is to the side, whereas over here it's in the center. So here in my column, I'm going to give this a cross-axis alignment of cross-axis alignments.start, refresh it, and now it's the correct place, but it still doesn't look so great. So I'm going to wrap this first in a padding widget, and I'm going to give this a padding of let's say const edge insets dots. How about all? Let's see. Let's try 15 first and see what we think of it afterwards. I'll put a comma here as well, so Flutter can format it better for me. So that's not quite right yet, so I'm going to use only instead. And I want quite a lot more padding on the left side. So let's say left 30. And if I compare it to the image, I want maybe 10 on the top. Let's do that. Refresh it. Yeah, it looks a bit better. Of course, it's not the right size yet. So then inside my text widget, I'm going to put another comma, style, text, style. And in my text style, I'm going to say font size. I'll try 50. I'll also give it a font weight of font weight.bold. So of course this is going to make it bold. And I'm also going to give it a letter spacing. Let's try 1.5 and refresh. Okay, so this is a bit too big. And what this letter spacing does, by the way, this is how much space there is between the different letters. So this is 1.5. If I did it on just one, you can see it's a bit closer together. And if I did it on a really big number to really illustrate what's happening, you can see 20 spaces it out with 20 pixels between them. But that's not quite what I want, so I'm going to take this down to 35, this to 1.5, see how that looks. What do we think? Yeah, I think that's about right. We might say that this is a bit smaller, so maybe I'll take this down to 30 instead of 35. And maybe I don't need the padding on the top because there's already some padding on the other side. Let's see how it looks if I refresh it. Maybe that's a bit better, maybe it's a bit worse, I don't know. You guys can change it however you prefer, you don't have to be exactly the same as me. Okay, but I'm gonna leave the this one here. I am gonna quickly give it a padding, so I don't need to worry about the padding on the other side. I'll give it a padding on the bottom, and let's use 10, see if that works okay. But okay, so I have my padding, and now I need to go to the next segment, and we said all of this is going to be a row with this on one side and this on the other. So I'm going to make my row. My row, of course, takes children, and then the first of my children is going to be a column with these two on one side and these two on the other. So I'm going to say column, and then inside the column I'm going to have two rows, and these should have been wrapped in square brackets, and then children. I don't think I ever mentioned why we use the square brackets, by the way. When we have a column, row, and a stack, this children is a list of widgets. And of course, you'll remember that the square bracket says list. So here I have a list with two items, both of which are rows. Looking back at my image, we can see I have this part set up, but now I need to actually insert the image. And this is a part we need to be really careful with because it's so easy to make a mistake. What I'm going to need to do is first I'm going to have to put my my images in an actual folder here. So I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it assets. And this assets has automatically gone under screens because that's where I was changing last time. But I'm going to drag it to my root directory, so just over here. And yeah, I want to move it. So now it's here. And I can either just leave it like this, or I can create a folder inside of this called images. And then I can put my images inside images. I'm going to copy the images from the finished, from the a finished project into my assets/images. You guys, of course, can just download these images from my GitHub. The link will be in the description below, as always. Now, as I mentioned, we need to be really, really careful with how we handle the images, because if we're just a little bit off, our images are not going to be recognized. We're going to go into our pubspec.yaml over here, and we're going to scroll down till where they have here, assets. We're going to hit Control/ to uncomment this, or alternatively, you could also just type it out manually. Assets, exactly like this, and then you're going to hit Tab to give it 2 spaces, hit this dash, single space, and we're going to need the exact names spelled exactly the way they are here, ASSETS/IMAGES/ and save. If you make a spelling mistake over here, it's just going to be a huge headache for you guys. It's going to be one of those things where nothing will work, and it's going to be quite difficult to figure out why they're not working. So be extremely careful with this. Also, the spacing needs to be exactly like this. If your spacing is wrong, again, it's not going to be recognized, and it's not going to be an easy thing to debug. But leaving that aside, we're going to go back here into our row, our first row, give this a children, and we're going to give it this first image here. So to do that, we're going to make an image widget, and the image widget takes a few things. The one we're looking for now is image, and there are several different kinds of image. We have network image for an image on the internet. I'm going to use asset image. An asset image, as you can infer, is an image I have here in my assets. I could name the folder anything I'd like, but it's an image which I already have in my files. And then we need to be really careful with the file name. Has to be identical to what this is. So assets, images, makeup1.png, save, refresh. And it's worked. Make sure you remember to have your assets folder over here. Make sure you remember your images folder over here. If you did write just makeup1.png and refresh this, notice it doesn't work. And in the error, it's going to say the following assertion was thrown, unable to load asset, makeup1.png. So if you do see an error which says unable to load asset, you know you either need to look at this part, specifically the string you've passed in, or double check your pubspec.yaml to make sure you're telling Flutter to look in the correct folder. And you do need to specify that assets folder. But now that we have that, we can close this. I'm going to close my sidebar as well with Control B and refresh this so I can get my image back. I mean, I forgot to update the name. And now I'm going to refresh it. And now it's going to appear again. However, now I'm going to get into a little bit of trouble, because you'll notice that if I look at this image, this is a little bit smaller than my image, because I need to have more space for the price and the button. And in my current implementation, there's not enough space for that. So what am I going to do? Should I just go back into Photoshop or GIMP, whatever, and edit the image? But what if a different person has a different screen resolution? Obviously, that's going to be problematic. And then on the other hand, what should I just wrap this in an expanded? But then what's it going to do for the height of the image? Can I do that? Well, there is an easier way of doing this. What I'm going to do is wrap my row over here, my parents row, control click in a widget. And the widget I'm going to use is LayoutBuilder. What LayoutBuilder does, it's a widget which gives us information to help us create the layouts. It gives us a constraints variable which contains information about the height and the width of the container or the item we are inside. And LayoutBuilder does not take a child. What it takes instead is a builder. And builder takes a function. The function has a build context and a box constraints. And then in the body of the function, I can hit return. And then I can just take this part, which I need, put it here, and then I can delete this. Well, first I need to put the semicolon. Because this is now a function, I have a return statements here. I need a semicolon at the end of this row. And now I can hit Control-Shift-I to automatically format everything for me, and I can save it. And another thing I'd like to point out is, so I'm showing you guys exactly what this takes, so I'm writing it all out, but Flutter will do this for you automatically. Flutter knows it's a build context, Flutter knows the box constraints, because Flutter is passing in this function for you. So normally you wouldn't type this out. Normally you would just have context and constraints. And in fact, you could just say CST or whatever. You can't write const because const is a keyword. But yeah, I'm just going to leave it as context and constraints. We're not actually going to use context either. So we could just pass in a dash. This dash means I'm not going to use it. Don't worry about it. But I'll just leave it as context. First, let's see what this constraint actually is, because I want to show you guys exactly what's happening. So inside the children of my column here, in this row, I'm going to have a text widget. And I'm going to give this text widget constraints dot max height. So we can see what that is. Dot toString. And look at this. It's infinity. That doesn't seem right, does it? So even though I was saying that the reason we're using Layout Builder is because it can give us the exact size of the item, it's giving me infinity, which clearly is incorrect. That will give me an error if I try to use that. Well, the reason it's doing this is because my Layout Builder here is the child of a column. And remember, the column is going to try to give me an infinite size. But of course, I don't have infinite pixels. So the way I can fix this, I can either wrap Layout Builder in a container, or what we've been doing usually is wrap it in an expanded. I don't need to give it a flex because the only other item is the text, and I do actually want my Layout Builder to take all of the space which is left, which the text doesn't take, the title here, which is what expanded does by default. So now that I have that, if I refresh it, we can see my text here, constraints.maxHeight, has changed to 370.4 and so on. So now it's giving me the height from here up until the bottom here, which is what the Layout Builder is taking. So now that I have this, what I can do is give my image a height of constraints.maxHeight. And what do you think? What do I want? Well, if I have this as my entire max height, I want to take maybe 0.8 of that, so 80% of that. So that will leave another 20% for the price and the button, and we'll see how that looks and decide if we need to change it. Yeah, so you can see it became a bit smaller. Maybe that's what I want, maybe not. We'll decide a bit later. But for now, let's also give it this heart icon over here. And we're going to do that the same way we used this and this. So that's going to be an icon button, and it's going to be inside the row here. So I'm going to say icon button. And icon button, of course, takes an onPressed. I can't find it there. But I know it takes an onPressed. And we'll just give it an arrow function which says print main image, add it as favorite, just to confirm that it is working. And then we're going to give it an icon, and this is going to be the actual symbol which shows up. And the icon is going to be an icon widget, which takes, well, I can't spell, which takes icons dot and then the name of the icon we want. And I happen to know this one, it's favorites, and I'm going to use favorite border. We can see over here, the favorite border is just the outline. If we use favorites like this, it's going to be filled up. But for now, we're going to use favorite border. And one thing I didn't mention last time is why we're using an icon widgets here, but then here we have icons.favorite border. That seems a bit confusing. Why don't we just get rid of icon, the widget, and just use this directly? Well, the reason is this is that image which you're seeing here. But then because I have a widget here, I can modify different values like you saw last time. I can give it a color, like what I'm going to do now. My colors, and I think we were using primary. I can also give it a couple commas to format it nicely. I can also give it a size. If I'm not mistaken, we were using 30. Let me just check in my app bar. Yeah, I was using 30 for those, so maybe I can use 30 here. Refresh this, see how it looks. So it seems to me that my heart icon is a bit bigger than the one they have. So what I'm going to do instead is make it, let's try 20. Refresh that. 20 is a bit smaller, so I'm going to try 25. And I think that's about right, so I'm going to use that. And then they have the heart icon towards the top, whereas I have mine here. So to fix that, I'm going to go into my row and give this going to be a cross-axis alignment of cross-axis alignment.start. And of course, you remember my row currently is just this image and this heart. So when I refresh that, it's going to put my heart all the way at the top. But I do want a little bit of padding. So I'm going to control click on my icon button, wrap with a padding widget, and give it a padding of const edge insets dot only top, and let's try 15, see how that looks. Save it, refresh, and I think that's the best we can do. I think that's correct. However, now I want to have this part, the price, and another button here. So I'm going to leave this row alone, and I'm going to go into this row afterwards. So I'm going to have another text widget, and in my text widget I'm going to have $, because remember, when I use the $sign inside a string, this is going to be string interpolation. This is going to say give me a variable by the name 15, but in this case I actually want the $sign, so I need to use that $, and then I think they had 15.00, but the price isn't too important. And give it a style of text style, and we'll start with font weight bold to make it bold. Save it, refresh it. I made a mistake somewhere. I forgot to wrap this in the square brackets and children. And I need to put a comma here, otherwise it won't format nicely for me. It does look the same as what they have, but I think this is a bit too small. So what I'm going to do instead is give it a font size of, let's try 18. I think that looks better. I think it's a bit more clear than the way they have it, and clarity is always a good thing. Okay, and now we're going to get to this image here, and you might be thinking it's an icon image, but if you zoom in, you can actually see it has a slightly different color around here, and it's in a little bit of a strange shape. I'm not sure how well you guys can see that, but, well, I can see it, so I'm going to make it look like that. Yeah, so the way we're going to get this specific shape, you can see it's quite a custom shape. We're going to use something called an InkWell. So next to this, I'm going to use InkWell. And what InkWell does, it wraps any widget you want to turn it into a button. And there are a few different types of buttons. There's a raised button, flat button, the icon buttons we used previously. but all of those have certain constraints on them. All of them kind of want certain things, want to do certain things. InkWell is something that I found to be the most versatile. So when I have something really custom, like this thing, I prefer to use InkWell. And InkWell is going to take an on tap rather than an on pressed. InkWell, of course, has a few different ways of pressing on it. It has the on tap, the double tap, the long press. We're just going to use an on tap, and I'm going to say print main item added, and I'm going to give it a child of container. We're going to try to create this kind of shape. The same way that we created these rounded edges, we can create these rounded edges. And I'm not sure how well you guys can see, but there's a smaller edge, and then this one's a really large curve. So we're going to have to use decoration, border, box decoration, and it's going to take a border radius of border radius dot only, because they're going to be custom, they're not going to be all the same. And we're going to use top left of border of radius dot circular, and let's try 5 first, and then top right radius dot circular 5, then bottom left radius dot circular 5, and the last one's going to be the long one. So I'm going to say bottom right. Let's try radius dot circular. Let's try 20 to see what it looks like. And I'm going to give this a color for now of black so we can see it more clearly. But we'll change that later to the correct one. And this should be inside the box decoration, not inside the border radius. Apparently I copied the wrong thing. Colors dot black. Refresh this. I've got to delete this. And it's not showing up because I haven't given this a child, so it's taking the minimum amount of space it can, which in this case is none. So I'm going to give it a text, just random thing. Refresh. Okay, so now we can see the shape it's taking. And if I compare that to this, I think it's should be a bit more curved on the outside, on the small ones, and a bit less curved on the big one. So I'm going to try 10. I'm going to try 15. And now maybe it's not quite enough. I'm also going to give this a padding to make it a bit easier to see. And the padding will take a padding of const edge insets dot all, and I'll just give it 5 for now. Okay, so I think maybe this is a bit too big. We'll try 7 here. And I think that's about correct. You guys can fiddle around with it, change it the way you guys want to change it. If you feel that it doesn't look quite the same, feel free to make it the same. Next, what I'm going to do is I want some kind of space between the price and the box here, but I'm not going to use a padding widget. There's another widget which we can use called sized box. And what sized box does is it just puts an empty space, and we can give size box either a height or a width or both. In this case, I'm going to give it a width of 10, save it, refresh it, and now you can see that's given me a spacing of 10 between them. Now that I have this, I'm going to try to get the correct color for this, and to do that, I'm going to go back into my Firefox, get RGB values from image. I'm just choosing the first one. So this is the same site we were on last time. and it's going to be this color here, which I believe is this one. I am going to use this one because it's just a little bit darker, so a bit easier to see. I'm going to copy this, go back into my colors at the end, going to make const secondary, 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 and set that equal to color dot from RGB. Delete this, and we can use the number except I need a 1 at the end. Put a comment there, and that's going to be it. So this color is now going to be this one. So now that I have this, I can go back to my body, and here, instead of color.black, I can give it my colors secondary. Save it, refresh it, and yeah, that looks much better. But now obviously you can see the text, which I don't want. What I do want instead is, if we take a look, we want an icon which is a plus. So the same way inside the icon button, I could do icon as the widget, then give an icons.favorite border. Inside my padding, which is inside a container, I can use that same icon widget and give it an icons dot, and I think it's plus, add, it's add. You can see the symbol over here, and this should have a color of primary. So color, my colors, primary, and a size, let's try 25, the same as the heart, but we might have to change it. Refresh that. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to change it. It's too big. Let's try 20. Let's try 15. I think 15 looks more similar to what they have. We could also say the padding's too much or too little, as you prefer. And I do want this space to be a bit bigger. Mine's too small, so I'm just gonna go into my size box here and change that to 20. Refresh. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. Yeah, that looks good. Maybe I want a sized box here as well, between my two rows. And because my two rows are inside a column, I can do that. Sized box, and I'm going to give my size box this time a height. And let's try 10. Refresh that. Yeah, I think that looks a bit better. So this is almost done. The only thing I need to do now is give it a padding on the edge here and also padding on the top, because it is a bit too close here, a bit too close here. But I'm not going to do that right now because I want to build this part first. And then once I have these two built, then I can use maybe a cross-axis alignment, main axis alignment. We'll see how we get on, and we'll see the best way of doing it once we're closer towards the finish. But for this video, we've been running quite long. So I'm going to give you guys an exercise for next time. Now that you've seen me build this main part, you can imagine building these two. It's going to be quite similar. So I'm going to challenge you guys to take what you've learned from this part and modify it slightly to build these two smaller images. Okay? I think you guys can do that. I believe in you guys. So that's going to be it for this video. So I hope you guys learned a lot. If you have, make sure you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and myself, Avidius, I'm out.